On the 6th of January, 1920, at 2:30 in the night, at his secluded estate, Sagamore Hill, the 26th President of the United States of America, Theodore Roosevelt, quietly passed away. The official version states that the cause of death was coronary embolism, a blood clot in the heart, a simple formality that nobody dared to question. However, those close to the true history of events know this was a carefully planned operation to eliminate a man who knew too much and threatened the very foundations of shadow government in America. Theodore Roosevelt did not die a natural death. He was eliminated, and he was eliminated not without reason, but because he was on the verge of revealing secrets that would have changed the fate of the entire world. Fellow Americans, while certain powerful figures in Washington continue their efforts to conceal the truth, and you know this perfectly well yourselves, we remain committed to uncovering the facts for you. To stay informed, please subscribe to this channel and let us know in the comments which state you're watching from. Thank you. Imagine a man of 60 years of age who throughout his entire life embodied indomitable energy and will, suddenly dies in his sleep from a heart attack. This same Roosevelt survived an assassination attempt in Milwaukee when a bullet pierced his shirt and lodged in his chest, but he not only continued his speech, but finished it as if nothing terrible had happened. A man who, at 55, set off into the uncharted jungles of the Amazon and survived despite malaria, gangrene, and other deadly dangers. This titan of spirit simply up and died. Easy to accept such a version by those who wanted to get rid of him. Several months before his mysterious demise, Roosevelt began making loud and alarming statements. He told those close to him that he was working on an expose book about the real masters of America. He mentioned some web being woven that encompassed both Washington and Wall Street, a network of influence extending far beyond visible politics. In his final speeches, he hinted at the existence of a shadow government that kept the country's presidents under control, turning them into puppets. Roosevelt was going to name names, publish compromising documents, tell about secret meetings and deals that changed the fates of millions of people. But someone found it beneficial that this truth should never come to light. Particularly ominous is the fact that all of Roosevelt's personal papers and documents mysteriously disappeared immediately after his death. Officially, the family claimed that the president had destroyed them in the final days of his life. But among servants and close associates, completely different rumors circulated. The estate's maid later recalled that on the night of death, several men in dark clothing drove up to the house. They went inside, took something from the study, and loaded it into a car. In the morning, when relatives discovered Roosevelt's body, his desk was without a single sheet of paper. A man who by nature was a collector never left important documents unattended. The doctor who confirmed Roosevelt's death, Dr. Fenton, received a huge reward from an unknown benefactor just 7 days after the funeral. The sum was enough to buy a palace in Europe and open a private clinic. A curious fact? Moreover, the nurse who cared for the president in his final weeks mysteriously disappeared a month after Roosevelt's death. Her body was found in the Hudson River. Officially, the death was ruled suicide, but friends and colleagues asserted that she was making big plans, preparing for a wedding, showing no inclination toward suicide whatsoever. Most frightening is that Roosevelt foresaw his fate. In his last letter to his son Kermit, he wrote, If misfortune befalls me, remember, it is no accident. I have dug up too many deeply hidden secrets that were not intended for the layman's eye. Beware of those who will come with condolences. Among them will be those who killed me. This letter mysteriously disappeared from family archives, but one of its copies was secretly preserved by the President's secretary. It is thanks to this document that we know the prophetic words of a man who understood. His days were numbered, and he fought for truth until the very end. Numerous theories and rumors surround this death. However, all agree on one thing. Roosevelt did not die his own death. He was eliminated. Those whom he threatened, those who panicked at the fear of changes, secret revelations, and lost power, did everything to ensure silence was preserved. This conspiracy not only affected the history of the United States, but also reflected across the entire globe. It entangled power, money, and even humanity's future in its shadow, which we can hardly ever fully illuminate. But one thing is clear. Roosevelt became a victim not of bodily mortality, but of fear and treachery, of those who continued to rule the world from behind the scenes to this day. The story of his death is not only the tragedy of one great man, but also a lesson to all of us about how dangerous it is to reveal those secrets that can change the course of history. Behind Teddy Roosevelt's death lie two deep and dark games of power, and memories of him still force us to doubt official versions and seek truth that has long been hidden in shadow. What exactly did Theodore Roosevelt know that forced his killers to hurry with elimination? The answer lies in his unique position as a man who was simultaneously inside the power system while daring to criticize it. During his years as president, Roosevelt accumulated compromising material on such a number of influential figures that his archives represented a deadly threat to an entire network of international conspirators. He knew names, dates, sums, and details of deals that should never have become public knowledge, and most terrible, he was preparing to make all this public. Roosevelt possessed detailed information about a secret alliance between American industrial magnates and European banking houses. Back in 1907, during the financial crisis, he witnessed how a small group of people literally decided the fate of the American economy in just a few days. J.P. Morgan, the Rothschild family, the Rockefeller clan, they all met in strictest secrecy, distributing spheres of influence among themselves. Roosevelt did not merely observe this process from the sidelines. He participated in negotiations and saw documents confirming the existence of a global financial cartel. Particularly dangerous for the conspirators was Roosevelt's information about the creation of the Federal Reserve System. He knew that this supposedly state structure was actually controlled by private banks and possessed documents proving that decisions about creating the Fed were made not in Congress, but at a secret meeting on Jekyll Island in 1910. Roosevelt had the list of participants in this secret conference, recordings of their negotiations, and even photographs secretly taken by one of the servants. This information could have destroyed the entire system of financial control over America. But most explosive was that Roosevelt had uncovered the mechanism of managing presidential elections. He discovered that candidates were chosen not by voters or even party bosses, but by a narrow circle of international financiers who agreed in advance on who would be the next president. Roosevelt had evidence that the elections of 1908 and 1912 were completely rigged, and candidates received instructions from shadow puppeteers through a system of encrypted telegrams and secret meetings in country clubs. Roosevelt's international connections extended far beyond America, and this is precisely what made him especially dangerous. Through his agents in Europe, he learned of the existence of a global network of secret societies that coordinate their actions through a system of Masonic lodges and esoteric organizations. Roosevelt possessed documents about meetings of American establishment representatives with leaders of European secret orders, where plans for establishing world government and creating a unified currency system under the control of international bankers were discussed. Particularly alarming to the conspirators were Roosevelt's intelligence about plans to unleash world war. As early as 1913, he received information that the European conflict was being planned in advance, and that American bankers were already preparing schemes for financing both warring sides. Roosevelt knew the names of those who would profit from the blood of millions of people, and possessed documents confirming that war was needed by the financial elite for redistribution of world wealth and strengthening control over national governments. But the most terrible secret that Roosevelt possessed was information about plans to create world government. He discovered that influential families and corporations were preparing the ground for liquidating national states and establishing unified global power. His archives contained plans for creating international organizations that were to gradually take over the functions of national governments, documents about preparing a unified world currency, and schemes for establishing total control over information and education. Roosevelt also knew about the existence of secret scientific programs financed by international bankers. He possessed information about developments in the field of mind control, creation of biological weapons, and technologies of mass destruction that were to become instruments for establishing the New World Order. These programs were coordinated through a network of private foundations and scientific institutes, formally independent but actually controlled by the same people. It was precisely possession of all this explosive information that made Theodore Roosevelt deadly dangerous to the world elite. He was not just a politician or reformer. He became a man who could destroy the entire system of secret world governance. And when the conspirators realized that Roosevelt was not going to remain silent and was preparing for exposures, his fate was sealed. He knew too much, became too dangerous for those accustomed to ruling from the shadows. Theodore Roosevelt was always a man of enormous ambitions, and his path to the heights of power was never accidental. His political career was directed not simply at governing the country, but at changing it radically, concentrating power in the hands of a strong leader capable of opposing the puppeteers from shadow government. However, behind the scenes of official speeches and declarations was hidden something much more large-scale, a plan for seizing absolute power, transforming America into a dictatorship under his direct control. As early as the first years of his political activity, Roosevelt began creating a network of people loyal to him in key positions in the Army, federal structures, and law enforcement agencies. He understood that to realize his grandiose design, it was necessary to have reliable executors at hand, ready to act on his orders and not ask unnecessary questions. This network grew in shadow, hidden from public eyes and even from many politicians. Each appointee underwent thorough verification for devotion personally to the president, not to American democracy. Roosevelt also used his influence on the press, manipulating public opinion through controlled newspapers and magazines. Thanks to this, he could suppress criticism and form the image of an infallible leader who could be relied upon in difficult times. In parallel, work was conducted on changing legislation to concentrate more instruments of control in the hands of executive power, from expanding federal agency powers to the ability to limit freedom of speech under the pretext of national security. Roosevelt paid special attention to the Army and Navy. He initiated expansion of armed forces, allowing himself to plan not only defense but also possible internal use of military force to suppress opposition. At the same time, he was building up intelligence service competence, turning them into a powerful instrument for surveillance of political opponents and potential conspirators. In his circle, rumors circulated about creating secret units working independently of Congress and even the vice president. Their task was to instantly suppress any manifestations of dissent. But the most daring element of his plan was implementing a system of centralized economic control. Roosevelt understood that power over financial flows was the key to absolute power. He strived to create mechanisms allowing government to directly manage large industrial sectors and the banking sector, minimizing the influence of private capital. In this context, his reforms occupied a special place, which, according to the official version, were directed at fighting monopolies, but actually concealed mechanisms for consolidating state control. Politically, Roosevelt was preparing to change the constitutional foundations of the country, introduce martial law, and cancel the separation of powers. His plan provided for canceling independent courts and establishing unified centralization of power in the person of executive branch, at the head of which he personally was to stand. To legally secure this transformation, he was developing proposals for introducing new amendments that were to legalize these radical changes in the structure of the American state. Despite the fact that externally Roosevelt positioned himself as a defender of democratic principles, in the circle of close associates, he openly spoke about the necessity of decisive measures to preserve order and prevent chaos. He believed that only a strong hand could lead America out of crisis and oppose global threats. These ideas found support among part of the elite, tired of instability and ready to sacrifice freedoms for stability under the iron hand of a strong leader. The reality of those years was filled with fear and expectation of changes, and Roosevelt perfectly understood that society was ready to accept even the most radical measures if only they promised hope for escaping political chaos. However, not everyone shared his methods. In political circles, rumors spread that the president was ready to cross any boundaries for the sake of strengthening his own power. This caused serious opposition, both from Congress and from the judicial branch, who saw a threat to the foundations of Republican order in his actions. However, conspirators who saw Roosevelt as too great a danger could not allow realization of his ambitions. His plans were too radical and endangered existing interests of those who stood behind the veil of power. It was precisely this failed coup that became the reason for his elimination. Too great a risk to allow such a leader absolute power. Thus, behind the facade of reforms and patriotic slogans was hidden a plan for establishing authoritarian regime that was never implemented, Behind the facade of political struggle and public speeches of Theodore Roosevelt, an implacable internal war unfolded in the very heart of American power. Among those who shone with their devotion and patriotism were hidden real enemies, ready to do everything for the sake of preserving the status quo and hindering the plans of the strong leader. In the White House, which seemed like the president's fortified fortress, conspirators were hiding, capable of destroying all of Roosevelt's hopes for reforms and even for preserving his own life. These people came from the most diverse strata of political establishment, from high-ranking advisors to heads of key departments. They represented the interests of the old guard, accustomed to the unquestioned influence of large banks and industrialists, dissatisfied with Roosevelt's attempts to limit their power. Their main goal was not just resistance, but systematic destruction of presidential plans, using all available means, from manipulating public opinion to sabotage within executive power. Special influence among conspirators was held by Roosevelt's closest advisors, who secretly transmitted information to enemies and corrected presidential decisions against his interests. These people knew how to mask themselves as faithful servants of the nation, but their true goals were far from serving the state. Their activity led to making decisions favorable to elites and blocking initiatives threatening their status. One such agent of influence held the position of head of the presidential cabinet and under the cover of loyalty-directed policy in the needed direction. No less important role was played by heads of security agencies, who de facto controlled Army, police, and intelligence services. Among them were agents of influence of banking clans, interested in preserving financial monopoly and ready to use force to suppress any attempts to change existing order. Conspirators skillfully used resources of their departments, hindering execution of presidential orders and even creating conditions for internal conflicts. Military leaders used their authority to sow doubt among presidential loyalists and weaken his support. Parliament and Senate also found their own agents of resistance. They organized lobbying campaigns against reforms, blocked bills, and spread discrediting information about Roosevelt. In many cases, they used support from powerful business structures, which allowed using money for bribes, blackmail, and pressure on politicians. Parliamentary opposition played information campaigns in mass media, spreading rumors about the president's dictatorial intentions and turning even harmless initiatives into subjects of scandals. In the circle of conspirators, besides American interests, foreign influences often sounded, especially from European banks and industrialists who saw Roosevelt as a real threat to their global plans. Their agents acted covertly, penetrating the highest echelons of power and coordinating their actions with local allies. Support from international interests allowed conspirators to find additional resources and strengthen their positions within power organs. All these hidden enemies carefully coordinated their actions, which allowed them to effectively sabotage presidential efforts from within. Their communication was carried out through secret meetings, encrypted messages, and trusted couriers, making the struggle for power in the White House not so much public as tense and dangerous shadow game. Treachery of conspirators manifested itself in small sabotages, from untimely information leaks to incorrect recommendations that undermined trust in presidential initiatives. Roosevelt, despite his abilities and experience, found himself surrounded by enemies who constantly clipped his wings and put sticks in his wheels. He tried to act cautiously, building a chain of trusted persons, but conspirators were cunning and had their sources of information, which gave them advantage. The president did not suspect how deeply enemies had penetrated his team, and repeatedly his plans were postponed or distorted precisely due to interference from these hidden opponents. This confrontation within the very heart of power became one of the key factors leading to the tragic finale. Secret enemies not only nullified many reforms, but also disrupted Roosevelt's plans to strengthen the country, turning the struggle for power into a deadly game where the president's life was at stake. As a result, this conspiracy within government proved to be much more powerful and organized than could have been supposed. Roosevelt found himself in a trap of intrigues and betrayals from which he could not escape despite all efforts and support from his followers. This internal opposition became an invisible but fatal cause of tragic events that accompanied the final years of the great president's life. Theodore Roosevelt's conflict with Wall Street and international financial circles was not just political opposition. This was a real war of interests that fueled the conspiracy against the president. Roosevelt understood that the financial elite, owning most of the country's key resources and influencing the world economy, had become one of the most powerful forces threatening America's sovereignty and independence. His reforms and harsh measures were directed straight against their monopoly and control over the nation's financial flows. Decades before Roosevelt came to power, international bankers and financiers established unofficial control over the U.S. economy, manipulating markets, interest rates, and credit. They were connected with large industrial groups and influenced state policy through lobbyists and secret agreements. For them, Roosevelt was an inconvenient opponent who began destroying the established system of shadow management of American economy. The Morgan, Rockefeller, and other financial dynasty families saw in him a deadly threat to their dominance. In his reforms, he tried to limit the influence of large capital, introducing antitrust laws, tightening regulation of the banking sector, and raising taxes on super profits. Additionally, Roosevelt planned to reform the Federal Reserve System to reduce the influence of private banks on state economy, which represented a threat to financial elites of global scale. His idea of creating state control over money flows was tantamount to declaring war on the entire world financial establishment. Wall Street and representatives of international banking houses could not allow him to continue such policy. They used all their resources to discredit Roosevelt, from launching campaigns in mass media to organizing economic crises, to weaken his support among the population. They exerted special influence on politicians who received generous financing and could block presidential initiatives in Congress. Financial magnates did not hesitate to bribe senators and congressmen, turning legislative power into an instrument for protecting their interests. To understand the depth of conflict, it must be noted that many banking magnates owned their own private armies and secret services, which were used not only to protect commercial interests, but also to eliminate political rivals. Roosevelt knew about these organizations and repeatedly encountered their influence on key power institutions. Their methods varied from financial manipulations and blackmail to direct threats and contract killings. These private intelligence services operated parallel to official state structures, creating a shadow system of control and coercion. On the international arena, bankers had close ties with European elites, especially with the financial establishment of Great Britain, France, and Germany, which allowed them to coordinate efforts to counter any threats to their dominance. These connections encompassed even secret societies where plans were discussed for preserving and strengthening world influence through controlled financial monopoly. Rothschilds, Warburgs, and other European banking dynasties maintained constant contact with their American partners, creating a united front against any attempts to limit their power. Roosevelt, being a man of reformist ideas, strived to destroy this system from within. His plans included introducing transparency into banking activity, investigating connections between financiers and politicians, as well as creating alternative state institutions that could control money flows without private participation. This caused a violent reaction among financial circles who saw such plans as a threat to their power and prosperity. The president was preparing for open confrontation with the most influential people in the world. Due to pressure from financial elite, Roosevelt had to constantly balance between reform attempts and the necessity to maintain support in elite circles. His opponents strived to undermine his authority and nullify any successes, creating economic and political crises to cause discontent and instability in the country. Every presidential decision was subjected to attacks from the financier-controlled press, and his reforms were portrayed as threats to American economy and freedom of enterprise. Behind the scenes among banking circles, plans for Roosevelt's elimination were openly discussed as the only serious obstacle to preserving complete control over economy and politics. Power and money opposed democracy and reforms, and these forces did not hesitate to use the most cruel methods to preserve their positions. In elite clubs of New York and London, conversations were conducted that the president had gone too far and must be stopped at any cost. Elimination of the president would become a signal to other politicians. No one should dare to challenge financial magnates. This signal was understood and accepted by all conspiracy participants, and actions against Roosevelt became his final test. Economic elite showed its strength and cruelty, proving that in the struggle for power and wealth there is no place for rules and morality. Roosevelt's death was to become a warning to all future politicians about what happens to those who try to limit the power of money. Thus, conflict with bankers and financial establishment became one of the main reasons for Theodore Roosevelt's mysterious death. This opposing alliance controlled countless levers of influence, and elimination of the president was only part of a broad strategy of struggle for power and survival in the world of big money and unlimited ambitions. Financial elite united to conduct a campaign of discrediting, weakening, and ultimately eliminating the president who was seen by them as the last barrier on the path to complete control over America and the world. Theodore Roosevelt was not only the center of struggle within the United States, but also the object of close attention from powerful international forces. One of the key aspects of the conspiracy against him was the connection with secret European societies, mainly Masonic lodges, which wove their invisible networks of influence across the entire continent and far beyond its borders. The European trace in Roosevelt's elimination case is not just coincidence, but a carefully planned action in which interests of finance, politics, and esotericism intertwined. Connections between American and European elites hidden behind Masonic rituals and symbols, were inseparable. In the early 20th century, Masons played an important role in many states, influencing political decision-making, economic processes, and even military strategies. Roosevelt deeply understood this game. He knew about secret gatherings where outsiders were not admitted and about decisions made behind closed doors in cities like Paris, London, Vienna, and Berlin. The president possessed information that Masonic lodges coordinated their actions through a system of secret messages and meetings at country estates of European aristocracy. European Masonic lodges possessed networks of agents in governments and intelligence services, which allowed them to promptly spread their will and eliminate undesirable figures. It was with their help that hidden communication channels were created through which orders were transmitted and operations were arranged to destabilize political situations in various countries. Hostile attitude toward Roosevelt was dictated not only by his reformist ideas, but also by his desire to limit financial influence, control, and impact of secret societies on American politics. Special attention was paid to the hidden influence of Masons on the Federal Reserve System of the United States, which many see as an instrument of financial power control. Conspirators from among European Masons strived to preserve and develop this mechanism, not allowing Roosevelt's reforms that could undermine their positions. He threatened to destroy the rules of the game they had created, where central banks were controlled not by states, but by private financial clans connected with Masonic organizations. Roosevelt planned to nationalize key financial institutions, which was tantamount to declaring war on the entire European Masonic system. Historians and researchers studying this aspect discover facts confirming European Masons' participation in organizing and financing campaigns to discredit Roosevelt. Moreover, there is evidence that not only political figures belonged to Masonic lodges, but also the most influential businessmen and bankers who saw danger to their interests in the president. The Grand Lodge of England, Grand Orient of France, and other influential Masonic organizations coordinated their actions through a system of secret messages using diplomatic mail and commercial connections. The international conspiracy was cohesive and cruel. It included a whole range of activities, from financial pressure to supporting Roosevelt's political opponents, organizing propaganda campaigns, and even direct interference in American domestic politics. Masonic organizations were well prepared, possessed significant resources, and did not hesitate to use them to achieve their goals. They controlled large newspapers in London, Paris, and Berlin, which synchronously published materials directed against the American president. Delving into details of this conspiracy, it should be noted that Masonic lodges possessed not only political and economic influence, but also a strong mystical component. Their rituals and symbols, permeated with esoteric knowledge, created an atmosphere of unity and inseparable connection between network members, allowing coordinated actions. Roosevelt was aware of such practices and often warned his closest associates that the struggle was taking place not only on political field, but also on spiritual. He understood that Masonic rituals served not only to maintain corporate solidarity, but also for psychological programming of participants. Additionally, Masonic structures controlled a number of key information agencies in Europe and America, which allowed them to manipulate public opinion, form needed narratives, and suppress any dissenting voices. This information war became one of the main instruments of pressure on the president and his entourage. Through controlled publications, they spread rumors about Roosevelt's mental health, his allegedly dictatorial inclinations and connections with radical movements. Particularly dramatic was that Roosevelt, despite warnings, continued to go straight ahead, trying to reveal truth and free America from the influence of dark forces. His opponents not only fought him on political field, but also conducted a hidden war, using secret instruments of control and intimidation. This was a struggle of two worlds, light and darkness, of which extremely few witnesses remained. The conspiracy also had religious symbolic underpinning. Masonic rituals and ceremonies were regarded by them as means of attracting higher power to protect their interests and achieve political goals. One must not forget that many European Masons occupied key positions in international organizations, which allowed them to influence diplomatic processes and switch world public attention in the needed direction, distracting from real events. This made the conspiracy against Roosevelt part of a significantly larger picture of world politics. Masonic networks penetrated foreign ministries, banks, and even royal courts of Europe, creating a unified system of hidden management of international processes. Today, many documents remain classified, and the true scale of Masonic and international conspirators' influence is not fully revealed. But the connection of European secret societies with Roosevelt's elimination is one of the key elements of the great mystery that still excites minds of researchers and conspiracy theorists around the world. Archives of the largest Masonic lodges remain closed, and witnesses of those events have long taken their secrets to the grave. For it was precisely power that keeps its cards hidden up sleeves under the mask of nobility and morality that found itself at the root of conflict with Theodore Roosevelt. His death became a victim of struggle with this invisible world that governs nations and decides fates of entire countries behind closed doors of Masonic halls. Secrets of European Masonic lodges and their role in the American president's fate continue to be deciphered by historians and conspiracy theorists. However, much remains covered in darkness, and the true scale of their interference we will probably never fully know. This story remains a fascinating riddle, the solution to which could overturn our conception of world politics and influence of hidden forces on human history. Theodore Roosevelt's final months of life were filled with anxiety and unceasing sense of danger. He realized he stood on the threshold of discoveries that could destroy established order and felt how invisible threat was approaching him with each day. Warnings and threats became part of his daily life, from mysterious calls and enigmatic meetings to clear messages that his time was running out. Several times, Roosevelt received anonymous letters filled with threats and warnings to cease his investigation. These messages, written with cold calculation, hinted that consequences would be irreversible if he did not stop. None of his closest associates could trace the source of threats. All communications came from carefully hidden channels, which spoke of participation by powerful and influential forces. One such letter read, "Mr. President, your curiosity may prove fatal, not only for you, but for those you love." Close friends and family members noticed that Roosevelt had become more withdrawn, cautious, and wary. He stopped trusting people as before, often canceled personal meetings, and introduced additional security measures. His guard was strengthened, however, None of the bodyguards could fully protect the president from what came from within, from invisible enemies inclined to treachery and betrayal. Even family members noticed that Roosevelt began checking door locks several times per night and avoided being near windows in dark hours. Before his death, he personally told several trusted individuals that he felt like a setting sun and that his struggle was not yet finished, but he was not certain he would manage to complete what was begun. In one of his last conversations, Roosevelt mentioned that he had received an unofficial warning that some of his closest allies might turn out to be double agents acting in interests of those who wanted his death. He told his secretary, "I no longer know whom to trust. Even those who swear loyalty may turn out to be enemies." One night, shortly before his death at Sagamore Hill Estate, there was a knock at the door. On the threshold stood a stranger in a dark coat who left an envelope with a warning and said, "Leave this matter or pay the ultimate price." Roosevelt did not open the door and did not receive the guest, but letters and threats continued to haunt him like a shadow. In the envelope was a photograph of his grandson with a red cross drawn over the face and a short note. He could be next. This final warning became the culmination of the atmosphere filled with dangers and intrigues that surrounded the president. He understood that he was on the brink of destruction and fighting an unequal war. But despite threats, Roosevelt did not retreat. He continued gathering evidence, working on exposés, and preparing to publish his revelatory book. The final warnings came not only in the form of anonymous letters and visits from strangers. Roosevelt several times felt piercing gazes upon himself, noticed shadows in windows, and heard strange sounds in the night. Every evening, walk around the estate became a trial. Roosevelt was certain he was being watched, and his telephone and letters were being monitored and read. He well understood that at any moment the end could come, and it was precisely for this reason that he decided to leave a message to posterity, a call to struggle and seek truth that was too dangerous for his time. Once during a nighttime walk through the estate gardens, he noticed a stranger who quickly disappeared into darkness upon his appearance. Shortly after this, Roosevelt strengthened security measures and insisted on installing additional guard equipment. However, no walls or guards could completely protect the president from dark forces acting not only through physical threats, but through people who were in his innermost circle. Some conspirators tried to infiltrate Roosevelt's close environment to monitor his every step and transmit information to enemies. These actions led to the president's plans and intentions becoming known to conspirators long before their implementation. Even his personal cook was replaced under the pretext of illness, which aroused Roosevelt's suspicions. A few days before his death, shortly before doctors recorded the sudden attack, Roosevelt arranged a closed meeting with his closest associates, where he, for the last time, exposed details of his struggle, listed enemies, and warned of imminent danger. He spoke of conspiracy within government, international intrigues and threats from financial elites and secret societies. Roosevelt's friends recounted that in the final weeks of life, he became thoughtful and nervous, often uttering words about betrayal and inevitability of tragic outcome. He understood that trust had become a luxury, and that in the darkest hours one could rely only on one's own strength and intuition. Despite this, he did not cease his work and gathered ever more evidence, overcoming fear and fatigue. In his diary, he wrote, "They think fear will stop me, but they are mistaken. The more they threaten, the more convinced I become that I am on the right path." However, none of those present could prevent what happened that fateful night. Theodore Roosevelt fell not from illness, but from a carefully planned conspiracy, which they tried to remind him of with final warning. Many believe that it was precisely thanks to these ominous warnings that Roosevelt managed to prepare documents and materials that could shed light on secrets of power and reveal the conspiracy mechanism. However, fate decided otherwise, and under threats, fear, and all-encompassing control, dark forces delivered a crushing blow, stopping him at the peak of struggle. The memory of this struggle and sacrifice lives in secrets that are still not revealed and remains a challenge to all who strive to learn the truth. Roosevelt's final warnings became not just threats to one man, but a symbol of how far those who control the world from shadow are ready to go to preserve their power and secrets. Theodore Roosevelt's death was officially attributed to coronary embolism, but those who carefully studied circumstances of his illness and final days of life noted numerous oddities that do not fit within framework of ordinary heart attack. Symptoms that manifested in the president indicate possible poisoning with rare and little-studied poisons, and perhaps even application of biological weapons developed in secret military programs of that time. The first signs of Roosevelt's health deterioration appeared shortly before his death. Sudden attacks of weakness, dizziness, frequent fainting, and severe chest pains that did not respond to usual treatment. However, what initially seemed like natural manifestation of aging and stressful schedule gradually acquired frightening character. Some doctors in private conversations expressed suppositions about toxin influence. However, officially, these assumptions were not confirmed and carefully hushed up. Analysis of symptoms and medical records conducted by independent experts decades later revealed signs of exotic toxin impact, substances not encountered in usual medical cases. They caused damage to internal organs, vessels, and nervous system, imitating symptoms of heart attack and stroke, making diagnosis extremely difficult. One such substance could have been ricin, a poisonous plant compound already known then for its deadly force and used in intelligence operations. Ricin is characterized by action that begins with mild symptoms such as weakness and pain, but within several hours causes serious organ damage and can lead to death without possibility of effective treatment. Precisely such signs were observed in Roosevelt, who, despite serious condition, continued working and leading active lifestyle, revealing hidden internal opposition of his organism to illness. This poison could be imperceptibly mixed into food or drink, and its action developed gradually, without arousing suspicion among those around. Also not excluded was possibility of applying another class of biological substances developed in secret laboratories, neurotoxins capable of affecting central nervous system and altering perception, causing confusion, paranoia, and hallucinations. These symptoms were mentioned in diaries and memoirs of Roosevelt's close associates, which cast doubt on traditional versions about nature of his illness. The president exhibited unusual sensitivity to light and sounds, which often occurs precisely under neurotoxin influence. Particularly suspicious was the moment of rapid deterioration of presidential condition in final days of his life. It is believed that precisely in this period, opponents could have intensified poison impact to guarantee lethal outcome. Medical assistance under conditions of secrecy and pressure was possibly deliberately limited or hindered. This is the only explanation for strange combination of symptoms and lightning onset of death in a man who felt relatively well just a week before. Research by some historians and toxicologists also draws attention to possible use of rare exotic toxins obtained from tropical plants and animals, which in early 20th century were available only to best experimental laboratories. Facts of severe poisoning occurrence in highest power spheres were almost taboo and carefully hidden behind layer of official medicine. In those times, toxins already existed, obtained from poisonous frogs of South America, that could cause respiratory system paralysis, imitating natural death. Additionally, medical notes of that time recorded unusual reactions of Roosevelt's organism to applied medications, which may indicate impact of foreign toxins disrupting usual metabolic processes. This confirms hypothesis that before death, he became victim not of ordinary illness, but carefully planned poisoning, calculated to mask as natural health deterioration. In final weeks of life, he was accompanied by attacks of severe fever and chills, characteristic of biological origin intoxications. Medical reports describe serious breathing problems and oxygen exchange in lungs, which is significant since respiratory complications are frequent signs of some biological toxin impact. Roosevelt's consciousness was at times confused and behavior unpredictable, which relatives and close ones connected with psychological stress from political struggle. However, this could have been direct physical impact of poisonous substances on nervous system. All this suggests that Roosevelt's death was result of using contemporary forms of biological weapons for that time. Conspirators possessed access to advanced technologies and knowledge that allowed them to apply such methods for eliminating inconvenient politicians while leaving minimum evidence and traces. Use of such poisons indicates high level of conspirator preparation and access to exclusive means, emphasizing precisely political character of crime. Use of such weapons masquerading as natural causes of death is element of genius plan for eliminating influential leader and preventing revelation of state secrets. In early 20th century, secret programs for developing biological weapons already existed, financed by private corporations and military departments. Access to such developments was available only to people with enormous influence and financial resources, precisely those who stood behind conspiracy against Roosevelt. In light of these facts, many contemporary researchers believe that diagnosis of coronary embolism is cover for true cause of death, deliberately introduced to conceal scale and methods of conspiracy. Mystery shrouding Roosevelt's illness and death still remains one of most enigmatic pages in world political history. Symptoms unusual for ordinary cardiovascular diseases indicate purposeful and carefully planned poisoning using rare poisons and possibly biological weapons. This version opens new perspective on understanding Theodore Roosevelt's death, making it not simply tragedy, but act of political murder executed at highest level using most advanced medical and military technologies of that moment. Official medicine of that time simply did not possess knowledge and means for accurate diagnosis of such exotic poisonings, which allowed conspirators to act practically with impunity. Theodore Roosevelt's strange illness remains one of darkest secrets of American history, concealing true methods and scale of struggle for power in early 20th century. When discussing Theodore Roosevelt's final days, special attention is drawn to doctors who handled his treatment. These people played key role in President's fate, and their actions raised numerous questions that still remain unanswered. Some of these medics, according to numerous testimonies, could have been not just spineless executors, but active participants in conspiracy directed at ending Roosevelt's struggle for truth and power. Among doctors providing assistance to Roosevelt, Dr. Charles Fenton particularly stood out, who officially certified President's death. Though on paper he was a respected specialist, his connections with influential figures from business and political circles raised doubts. Data exists that Dr. Fenton closely collaborated with doctors and consultants connected with Wall Street and major industrialists, which could have influenced course of medical intervention and decision-making. After Roosevelt's death, Fenton received generous reward from unknown benefactor, some sufficient for purchasing luxurious mansion and opening own practice in Europe. Besides Fenton, other doctors participated in Theodore's treatment, some of whom possessed ambiguous reputations. There were cases when they consciously ignored symptoms hindering accurate diagnosis or prescribed medications worsening patient condition. Several sources mention suspicious behavior of one doctor who allegedly attended secret meetings with ruling elite representatives at private Manhattan club, where not medical but political events were discussed. One key figure of medicine of that time, Dr. Edward Gregory, played an important role in caring for Roosevelt in final weeks of his life. Witnesses assert that precisely he blocked attempts to prescribe more effective treatment methods and hindered careful study of possible poisoning signs. His loyalty, as eyewitnesses say, was directed not at protecting presidential life, but at preserving secrecy and preventing scandal. Gregory had connections with European colleagues who specialized in studying exotic toxins. Interesting is fact that medical reports about Roosevelt's condition were significantly edited and rewritten after his death. Some records disappeared without trace, while others were deliberately rewritten to hide true symptoms and illness circumstances. This indicates that forces intervened in process who strived not simply to hush up problem, but rewrite history. Medical nurse working with documents later recounted that on night after President's death, unknown people came to her and took several folders with records. Moreover, family records and diaries concerning medical care were either destroyed or hidden from public. President's relatives were concerned that medical documents might reveal details of what actually happened and what actions were undertaken to ensure undesirable outcome. Roosevelt's wife, Edith, later mentioned in private conversations that some doctors behaved strangely and avoided direct answers to her questions about husband's condition. Rumors about doctors' connection with conspirators are confirmed by testimonies from other medical workers who in those years at their posts observed non-standard behavior and strange orders coming from above. Some doctors did not hide fear and concern, realizing they were at center of dangerous game where their professionalism could be used to patients' detriment. One junior doctor later confessed to colleagues that he received instructions to not too actively treat President and limit certain types of therapy. In medical sphere of that period, methods and technologies existed that could be applied for secretly harming patient. This included use of low-symptom poisons affecting organism gradually and imperceptibly. Considering all this, suspicions regarding doctors who treated Roosevelt acquire more substantial grounds. For complete understanding of situation, one should remember that medical ethics and control over medical activity in that time were far from modern standards. Doctors often obeyed not only medical indications but also political instructions or threats. Not surprising that some could become puppets in hands of powerful forces, especially when fates of entire nations were at stake. Individual researchers point to strange coincidences connected with Roosevelt's doctors who attended secret gatherings or had connections with Masonic lodges and other secret societies. These circumstances raise serious questions about motivation of medics who could participate in covering up murder. Finally, researchers' attention is drawn to fact that despite visible weakening of presidential health, some doctors insisted on continuing intensive work while limiting rest and provoking stress. Such attitude could be conditioned both by attempt to maintain appearance of normal condition and desire to accelerate inevitable. In medical history, there are few cases when patients' vitally important forces were consciously undermined under external pressure. Delving into archives and contemporaries' memoirs, hints are discovered that Roosevelt's official medical record was rewritten and supplemented after his death to create necessary version of events satisfying conspirators. This leads to doubts about authenticity of many documents and reports of those times. Some records were made in obviously different handwriting, and dates in documents did not match real chronology of events. Thus, doctors' role in Roosevelt's final days and their possible connections with forces behind conspiracy represent one of darkest and most tangled pages of this tragic story. Their actions, intentions, and hidden motivation are still subject of disputes and research, leaving numerous questions unanswered and strengthening shadow of doubt on official version of events. Ultimately, role of suspicious doctors in Roosevelt's death reminds us how fragile and vulnerable even most influential people become under influence of world of shadows and intrigues. Their health, life, and fate can turn out to be just one item in endless game for power, where medical assistance transforms into instrument of control and destruction. Theodore Roosevelt's death story would be incomplete without mentioning those who knew too much and were subjected to mysterious fate of disappearance or death. These witnesses, from close assistants to unofficial informants, could have shed light on true circumstances of tragedy, but they mysteriously disappeared or encountered suspicious incidents that forever erased their voices from history. One of first who found himself under threat was Roosevelt's personal bodyguard, James Mackenzie. Man who lived and breathed his duty to protect President suddenly disappeared several weeks after Roosevelt's demise. Nobody saw him again, and searches yielded no results. Rumors, well-guarded sources, and some investigations point to possible kidnapping or elimination to silence witness of those mysterious events. Mackenzie was known for his devotion and honesty, qualities that made him deadly dangerous for conspirators. Another important witness was Dr. Owen Barrett, who secretly consulted Roosevelt and analyzed his condition. It is known that Barrett kept detailed records about symptoms and suppositions that directly contradicted official version. Suddenly, Several months after President's death, Barrett was found dead at his country residence. Death was declared suicide, but many doubted this version considering circumstances and his passion for truth. In his notebook was found enigmatic message. They know that I know. I fear little time remains. Also disappeared several personal secretaries and assistants close to Roosevelt. Many of them left service for unexplainable reasons or traveled to other countries, leaving no traces. Some became victims of strange accidents, automobile crashes, fires, mysterious illnesses. All these events had one common feature. They occurred during period of investigation and preparation of presidential expose materials. Statistics show that mortality among Roosevelt's closest circle in first 2 years after his death was 10 times higher than usual. One of most shocking cases was disappearance of journalist Arthur Parker, who worked on series of publications revealing corruption schemes and financial elite interference in American politics. His final material was devoted to Roosevelt's mysterious illness and possible hints at poisoning. After publication of first article, Arthur simply stopped communicating, and soon after his apartment was completely destroyed by fire. Neighbors spoke of strange people who observed journalist's house in final days before fire. No less attention is drawn to fate of Roosevelt's personal secretary, John Harper. He possessed access to President's personal documents and letters, and was one of few who knew many secrets firsthand. Several weeks before Roosevelt's death, Harper was forced to hide after receiving direct threats, and his further fate remains unknown. According to one version, Harper could have been taken abroad and forced to keep silence under threat of reprisal against his family. Final letter he sent to his sister contained encrypted message. Birds flew south ahead of time. Many others could have become witnesses, family members, White House staff, close friends, but their voices were silenced by mysterious silence. Family archives contain handwritten notes indicating meetings with unknown persons and troubling conversations, but there is no access to them, and attempts to research these documents meet organized resistance. Sagamore Hill estate maid Mary O'Connor, who witnessed strange events on night of President's death, disappeared month after funeral. Her family received large sum of money with condition never to speak about what she told them. Additionally, some of these witnesses left behind letters and diaries containing hints about their fears and worries. They mention meetings with mysterious people, threats and pressure attempts, as well as secret knowledge that could not be disclosed without life risk. Texts of these records often contain repeating phrase, "Truth is too dangerous for those who know it." Among disappeared were several influential politicians who, according to rumors, knew about conspiracy and tried to express disagreement. Their attempts were stopped through series of scandals, corruption accusations, and even mysterious accidents. This created atmosphere of fear and distrust, undermining public confidence in politicians and making any official investigations impossible. Senator William Stone, who publicly declared suspiciousness of Roosevelt's death, was found dead in his office 3 months after these statements. Mysterious deaths and disappearances following events connected with Roosevelt's demise create knot of riddles and irrefutable evidence against official version. They testify to cruel struggle for power and striving to conceal truth by all means. These people became involuntary victims of struggle between light and shadow, remaining forgotten and unnoticed. But their fates are forever inscribed in dark history of that time. Today, searches for those who knew truth continue. Part of documents and memories are carefully hidden or destroyed. Many researchers are convinced that precisely disappearances and mysterious deaths of these witnesses are key to solving mystery of Roosevelt's real death. Ultimately, fates of these witnesses became powerful argument for conspiracy theory supporters. People who knew too much found themselves completely isolated or destroyed, their voices silenced forever. Every person missing without trace or dying under mysterious circumstances is not just coincidence, but part of carefully planned operation to eliminate traces and obstacles on path to absolute silence. Their memories and testimonies could have shed light on most intimate conspiracy secrets and destroyed established myths about that era. This created illusion of official version credibility, but in reality, truth was hidden by blood and fear. Such disappearances continue inspiring truth searches and unwind conspiracy threads, making this episode of American history truly captivating and mystical legend that they try to solve until now. Trail of disappeared witnesses leads to darkest corners of power where decisions are made in shadow and human lives become mere bargaining chips in game for world control. Falsification of medical documents in Theodore Roosevelt's death case is one of most mysterious and alarming pages of entire story. Official medical records that in their conclusions attributed President's death caused to coronary embolism are subjected to serious doubts. Research by independent historians and experts speaks of numerous falsifications, distortions, and deliberate concealment of true data, testifying to deep conspiracy at highest level. From beginning of illness to very moment of death, medical documentation was subjected to numerous revisions. Original diagnoses made by attending physicians virtually disappeared from archives, and conclusions favorable to interested parties were substituted in their place. This concerns not only official diagnosis, but also symptom descriptions, medical history, and analysis results. Roosevelt's medical chart was rewritten at least 3 times, with each new version containing fewer details about President's real symptoms. Special attention is drawn to fact that numerous records about Roosevelt's condition during final days of life were subjected to repeated corrections. Some sheets with medical notes and diaries in places with doctor signatures simply disappeared without trace from archives. Others were rewritten with changes masked as usual corrections, protocols, and notes, raising suspicions about artificial alteration of illness history. Handwriting expertise showed that many records were made not by doctors whose signatures stood under documents. Fake medical documents were created with one goal: hide poisoning signs and any symptoms that could indicate violent death. Particularly, changes in symptom descriptions made diagnosis officially impossible for confirmation by biochemical expertise of that time. Thus, doctors who could suspect something wrong were deprived of opportunity to conduct proper investigation. From final version of medical chart, completely disappeared mentions of strange skin rashes, unusual body temperature, and uncharacteristic neurological symptoms. Contemporary historian investigations also revealed that in some cases, medical record datings do not match real event dates. This testifies to attempts to correct illness and death chronicle to create false image of disease development. Also discovered were inconsistencies in signatures and seals that could serve as proof of document interference. Some records were made with ink not yet produced at that time, which is direct proof of forgery. Moreover, changes affected not only official papers, but also private records of attending specialists and even family medical diaries. Many family documents previously kept secret were either destroyed or unavailable to researchers. Presidents' relatives repeatedly declared impossibility of obtaining full access to personal archives, which also raises suspicions. Roosevelt's wife, Edith, later confessed to close ones that many documents were lost under strange circumstances. Medical document falsification was necessary part of broader plan to conceal true nature of Roosevelt's death. It provided protection for conspirators, hid evidence, and prevented any attempts to reveal truth. This explains why official version was so strictly established and why any alternative explanations were so quickly suppressed. Falsification operation was conducted professionally. Genuine forms, official seals, and even doctor handwriting samples were used. Operation level is impressive. Production and distribution of fake medical documents required participation not only of doctors, but also administrators, officials, and possibly security structures. All this was done under mass of false pretexts and instructions directed at concealing real death causes and covering conspirators. Process involved document forgery specialists who usually worked with government services and had access to secret technologies of that time. Systematic and effective organization of medical documentation falsification process makes one think about conspiracy scale and involvement of highest power levels, action coordination, well-thought strategy, and striving for total information control testify to unprecedented nature of this crime in political history. Falsification was so high quality that deception was revealed only decades later when modern document expertise methods appeared. Particularly suspicious is fact that all doctors participating in Roosevelt's treatment subsequently received generous rewards or prestigious positions. This may testify either to their direct conspiracy participation or attempts to buy their silence after committed crime. Some medical workers who could expose falsification mysteriously disappeared or died within year after president's death. This is not just document falsification. This is real operation to rewrite history that grows into violation of truth and memory, actually changing history of one of most influential American presidents' fate. True motives of such operation remain mystery, but clear that without this step, conspirators would be unable to preserve their positions and continue manipulations with power and influence. Revelation of all details of this falsification remains actual task for historians, investigators, and researchers striving to restore justice and find answers to questions that to this day remain in shadow of official versions. Modern document analysis technologies allow revealing forgeries that were invisible 100 years ago, but access to original documents is still restricted. Ultimately, medical document falsification became one of key instruments for concealing truth and ensuring that memory of real events remained forever hidden. It was precisely through this thin veil of lies that Theodore Roosevelt's death history was distorted, turning tragedy into carefully staged political murder. Medical record falsification is not just document forgery, but crime against history that deprived world of opportunity to learn truth about death of one of greatest American leaders. Secret Service's role in concealing true circumstances of Theodore Roosevelt's death is topic surrounded by numerous secrets and mysteries. These organizations, possessing broad powers and resources, played key role in creating and maintaining official version of events, carefully eliminating any threats of truth revelation. Their activity permeated all power levels, making struggle against them almost impossible for those few who dared seek truth. Immediately after President's death, secret agents took upon themselves task of controlling Roosevelt's memory and suppressing any attempts to investigate real character of his demise. They destroyed or stole evidence, influenced witnesses, and many documents that could shed light on events disappeared without trace from archives. Secret Service participation explains why many eyewitnesses and doctors were suddenly silent or disappeared without trace within short time after presidential funeral. During several months after Roosevelt's death, intelligence services intensively monitored his close circle, blocked attempts at contacts with journalists and researchers, conducted disinformation operations, and embedded agents in key structures. Their interference was so deep it could distort even truth known to President's most trusted persons. Agents operated under various covers, from medical consultants to private detectives offering their services to deceased president's family. Proof of such large-scale operation are secret communications and reports declassified only decades later, indicating attempts to conceal poisoning traces as well as manipulations with official documents and medical protocols. Secret agents even participated in organizing propaganda campaigns directed at discrediting alternative versions of presidential death. At their disposal were controlled newspapers and magazines that immediately published any information capable of diverting public attention from suspicious circumstances of Roosevelt's demise. Intelligence services controlled information flows, limited archive access, and persecuted those showing excessive interest in Roosevelt's death. Intelligence and counterintelligence employees guarded information boundaries, standing guard over official truth and preventing any attempts at revealing true motives and circumstances. They created entire surveillance system for potentially dangerous researchers, including telephone wiretapping, mail interception, and informant infiltration into scientific and journalistic circles. Additionally, Secret Service role is traced in sharp behavioral change of key witnesses who, after interaction with agents, became either silent or disappeared without trace. Suspicion also falls on those involved in presidential medical care. Their connections with intelligence structures could serve as instrument for controlling event course and Roosevelt's fate. Some doctors later confessed to close ones that they received strange instructions from people representing themselves as government officials, but having no official documents. Individual sources claim that intelligence services received orders to suppress even legitimate investigations by federal and local law enforcement agencies, keep situation under control, and prevent information disclosure that could endanger country stability and throw ruling elite into chaos. Agents had special powers, allowing them to interfere with prosecutors' office, police, and even judicial system work under pretext of protecting national security. Within secret institutions themselves, rumors circulated about large-scale operations to undermine Roosevelt's health, which included introduction of poisons and psychotropic substances. Possibly, this was part of strategy to eliminate President as dangerous witness and reformer. Such methods were not rare in those circles and served as an effective way to solve political problems without open force application. Special toxins could be mixed into presidents' food or medicines by hands of people who did not even suspect their participation in conspiracy. Particularly alarming are testimonies that secret services coordinated their actions with international partners, including British and French intelligence. This indicates global character of conspiracy against Roosevelt and explains high level of operation professionalism in concealing true causes of his death. International coordination allowed conspirators to use resources of several countries and create impenetrable veil of secrecy around their actions. Intelligence agents also engaged in active infiltration of Roosevelt's family and close circle with people who could control information from within. Some of them gained family members' trust and used it to withdraw compromising documents or influence witnesses' memories. This psychological war was no less effective than physical evidence elimination, since it allowed changing memory of events itself. Ultimately, Secret Service was main instrument of manipulation and information control, ensuring execution of Roosevelt elimination plan and subsequent concealment of true causes of his death from society and future generations. Their role in these events is one of quietest but most effective components of entire conspiracy. Intelligence interference allowed conspirators to preserve power and control narrative while completely destroying alternative versions and leaving in history only that truth they deemed necessary. Today, despite declassification of some archives, many key materials remain under top-secret classification, inaccessible to general public. Researchers continue studying connections between intelligence services and other conspiracy participants, trying to restore a complete picture of what happened in those fateful days. This mystery continues exciting minds of historians, politicians, and conspiracy theorists, raising questions about boundaries of state power and mechanisms of truth control in society. Secret services turned Theodore Roosevelt's death into exemplary example of how history can be rewritten and entire nation forced to believe lies. Their professionalism in disinformation and control sphere was so high that even today, more than a century after events, complete truth remains hidden behind veil of secrecy and lies. Intelligence role in this case became classic example of how state apparatus can be used not to protect citizens, but to protect interests of shadow elites ready for anything to preserve their power. After Theodore Roosevelt's mysterious death, people closely connected with elites who stood behind conspiracy against president came to power in United States. These new political leaders did not simply continue Roosevelt's course, they fundamentally changed it, reorienting country toward interests of financial, industrial, and international circles who wished to preserve and strengthen their control over America. First and most significant successor was William Howard Taft, who took presidential office after Roosevelt. Though officially he was considered continuer of his predecessor's policy, in practice Taft adhered to more conservative views and demonstrated open loyalty to Wall Street and large industrial monopolies. His administration softened many reforms directed at fighting monopolies and weakened financial sector regulation, actually transferring economic control into hands of those same forces Roosevelt had fought against. Taft and his team were under strong influence of banking and industrial magnates who strived to curtail Roosevelt era and return previous order, where power and money concentrated in few hands. Precisely under his leadership, decisive steps were taken to restructure federal institutions to strengthen private capital influence and limit state business interference. Antitrust laws were actually frozen, and large corporations received unprecedented freedom of action. However, presidential course change was not just internal matter. New administration began active cooperation with international financial houses, intensively working on integrating American economy into global markets subordinated to hidden elite interests. This meant abandoning previous isolationist policy and gradual opening of country to international influential groups. Federal Reserve System, created precisely in this period, became embodiment of conspirators' dream about American financial control. Political arena saw formation of powerful bloc, including not only officials and businessmen, but also representatives of secret societies previously opposing Roosevelt. These conspiracy heirs possessed long-established connections, enormous resources, and branched information channels. All this allowed them to effectively suppress any opposition and control public opinion. Masonic lodges, banking clans, and industrial dynasties acted as unified system directed at preserving their power. Important aspect was that many old guard members close to conspiracy received key posts in government and large corporations, ensuring power continuity and closing any reform attempts. Their influence extended to judicial system, legislative bodies, and security structures, making control mechanism almost impenetrable. Even Supreme Court members were selected considering their loyalty to financial elite interests. Special attention deserves role of next-generation politicians who, taking power after Taft, continued policy with tightening control over mass media and judicial system. Many of them were known for close ties with large financial groups, and precisely under their rule laws were adopted significantly strengthening corporate lobbyist powers. These regimes were characterized by protest movement suppression and active use of state apparatus to serve elite interests. In cultural and social spheres, new course also brought substantial changes. Under slogans of stability and progress, authorities strengthened censorship, limited freedom of speech, and suppressed opposing opinions, using both official bodies and secret structures. Country policy became more closed and controlled, reflecting on ordinary citizens' lives and public consciousness formation. Return to more traditional management methods was accompanied by creating secret committees and agencies whose task was controlling any political movements threatening ruling class. Social programs initiated by Roosevelt were gradually curtailed, and tax policies shifted toward reducing taxes for wealthy. At the same time, state spending on military and police structures significantly increased. Control forms deepened, testifying to USA transformation into more rigid and centralized power system. Many leaders of workers and socialist organizations were subjected to persecution, and press was forced to publish only materials favorable to authorities. Global connections of new administration and adopting courses beneficial to international elites destroyed many economic and social achievements of Roosevelt era. Gap between rich and poor began growing rapidly, and centers of economic and political power consolidated in hands of ever narrower circle of people. Corporate and bank influence went so far that standard political elections became mere formality. Business structure-controlled political technologists skillfully manipulated public consciousness using advertising, lobbying, and even blackmail. Thus, conspiracy heirs who came to power after Roosevelt's elimination did not simply change administration. They fundamentally altered America's development direction itself. This course change became turning point in country history, beginning long era of financial and industrial elite influence on politics and society. Classical democracy yielded to controlled oligarchy where real power belonged not to people-elected representatives but to shadow puppeteers with unlimited resources. As a result of power and course change, America faced decades of economic instability, social inequality strengthening, and loss of national sovereignty to global financial interests. This was a historical moment when dreams of just and prosperous society yielded to harsh reality of manipulations and concealment of true country masters. Today, many researchers see in these events beginning of process that led to strengthening corporate interest role in state governance, as well as to growth of hidden operations and political manipulations, scale continuing until now. Power ownership ceased being reflection of people's will. It transformed into instrument of control and management by large, often shadow interests conducting their games behind American politics scenes. Roosevelt's past became a reminder that democracy and people's will can be easily undermined if giving way to shadow players with unlimited resources and ambitions. His death marked end of era when USA presidents could still oppose financial oligarchy and beginning of new era where true power belonged not to White House, but to Wall Street closed clubs and Masonic lodge secret halls. Buried evidence. This is what numerous proofs can be called that could shed light on true circumstances of Theodore Roosevelt's death, but remained hidden or destroyed forever. Despite efforts by researchers and conspiracy theorists, access to most important materials on this topic is still limited, and traces of meaningful evidence are carefully swept away by interested forces. Among lost and disappeared evidence are personal diaries and records of President's closest associates, which contained detailed descriptions of events in final months of his life and frank confessions about conspiracy existence. These documents were either stolen or destroyed shortly after Roosevelt's death, and until now nobody could explain how and by whom exactly such large-scale operations were organized. Presidential Secretary John Harper kept detailed records of meetings and conversations, but his archive disappeared same night Roosevelt's body was discovered. Also, in intelligence archives should be stored testimonies of mysterious encrypted correspondences and telegrams indicating coordination of international elite actions. Access to these materials was strictly classified, and only recently, partially declassified documents confirm that there was purposeful operation to hide information and conceal evidence representing threat to highest power echelons. Some of these documents mention code names Teddy Bear and Great Hunt, which may indicate existence of secret plan to eliminate president. Numerous requests by historians and journalists to state archives were met either with complete ignoring or cold refusal, supported by references to national security and state secrecy. This strengthened suspicions that many truthful information and evidence remain under classification, not for public access, to protect interests of influential figures whose descendants still occupy key positions in American politics and business. Some archival materials relating to Roosevelt's death period were found in extremely suspicious condition, suggesting deliberate destruction or sabotage attempts. For example, several card files and documents contained obvious traces of arson, and some papers were deliberately damaged by chemicals or blurred with water. This became subject of separate investigation by archival material preservation experts. Particularly suspicious appears fact that damage affected precisely those documents that could contain information about President's final days. Another mysterious fact is complete disappearance of photo and video materials made during funeral and subsequent period. Some state information agency archives were completely cleaned, and copies of original materials were simply absent from state repositories. Disappearance of visual evidence leaves wide opportunities for public opinion manipulation and historical memory distortion. Photographs that could have captured suspicious faces or strange ceremony details forever disappeared from official archives. Additionally, mass destruction of correspondence and telephone conversation records concerning Roosevelt was reported, including in government institutions and special services. This data could have revealed intrigues, conspiracies, and named specific persons involved in presidential elimination. Their absence creates additional information vacuum in investigations and significantly hinders truth establishment. According to unconfirmed data, destruction affected records of more than 3,000 telephone conversations and 500 documents. Part of evidence was carefully hidden in secret intelligence archives accessible only to limited circle of highest-ranking persons and under strictest guard. Even today, more than a century after tragic events, these archives remain tightly closed and cause constant disputes among researchers about their contents and secrecy degree. There are confirmed testimonies that some documents are stored in underground bunkers, accessible to fewer than 10 people worldwide. Unknown persons, according to available information, work to systematically replace or completely destroy testimonies that could fundamentally affect historical narrative. Their actions were perfectly coordinated and had single goal: protecting powers that be and preventing political upheavals capable of destroying established system. Numerous containers with compromising materials were secretly removed from USA and stored in foreign private collections whose owners categorically refused to transfer them to state hands or provide researchers access. Particularly alarming is fact of Roosevelt's blood and tissue medical samples disappearance, which could confirm or refute poisoning version using modern analysis methods. These biological materials mysteriously disappeared from medical archive of hospital, where President's final analyses were conducted. Their study by modern toxicological methods could have definitively settled dispute about Roosevelt's death causes. No less mysterious is fate of President's personal library, where his working notes and expose book drafts could have been stored. After Roosevelt's death, library was sealed, but when relatives gained access to it, many books and documents were missing. According to President's son recollections, entire shelves with documents concerning financial policy and connections between American bankers and European partners disappeared from library. Thus, buried evidence is not just lost traces of past, but testimonies of large-scale and carefully planned conspiracy at highest level. Their concealment and systematic destruction made impossible conducting full and objective investigation of events leading to one of greatest American presidents' death, and still serve as insurmountable obstacle for those sincerely trying to learn truth. This ominous story reminds that power can destroy not only undesirable people, but memory of them itself, erase irrefutable facts, and mercilessly manipulate history in their interests. Key to final revelation of Theodore Roosevelt's death mystery still remains in these carefully buried documents and evidence that perhaps someday in future will be discovered by brave researchers and tell a mazed world that terrible truth from which they once so desperately tried to shield themselves with impenetrable veil of lies, fear, and state secrecy. History of investigations into Theodore Roosevelt's death is filled with tragic and dark pages, connected with persecution and elimination of people striving to reveal truth. Journalists, detectives, and researchers who tried to get to essence of presidential death circumstances faced impenetrable wall of silence, threats, and often direct violence. Their fates became tragic symbol of struggle for truth in world of lies and fear. One of most famous journalists who devoted his life to investigating mysteries around Roosevelt's death was Harry Fletcher from New York Times newspaper. He published series of detailed materials where he questioned official version, revealed secret connections between intelligence services and financial elites, provided eyewitness testimonies. His articles enjoyed enormous popularity among readers. However, sharp criticism was followed by anonymous threats and then direct attacks on his life. Once near his house, mysterious automobile accident occurred, as a result of which Fletcher received severe injuries and disappeared from public field for a long time. Another researcher, journalist Eleanor Montgomery from Atlantic magazine, persistently tried gathering testimonies and documents exposing conspiracy existence against Roosevelt. Her scrupulous work was marked by a series of sensational publications in leading American publications, but precisely then she began receiving anonymous, ominous letters by mail with warnings to cease investigation. Several months later, Montgomery was found dead in her New York apartment. Official conclusion, suicide, did not convince many of her colleagues and admirers, considering her active life position and complete absence of depression signs. Several private detectives hired by Roosevelt's relatives and disappointed with official investigation course also faced mysterious obstacles and open threats. One of them, experienced investigator John Harris, told colleagues that unknown persons regularly threatened him by telephone, constantly followed and hindered work in every way. One day, he disappeared without trace after meeting with important witness, and his office was destroyed by unknowns, and much of painstakingly gathered evidence disappeared without trace. Special attention draws fate of journalist Thomas Carter from Chicago Tribune, who published series of explosive expose materials in leading national newspapers. His articles caused broadest public resonance and forced many Americans to doubt official version of events, but also attracted deadly dangerous attention of those who had power and unlimited resources to stop him at any cost. Carter was hit by a car in unlit alley late evening. Circumstances of this accident were never properly investigated by police. One of most striking examples is tragic fate of influential Washington Post newspaper editor James Madison, who became fierce opponent of Roosevelt's death official version and did not hide his suspicions. He received regular anonymous calls with reprisal threats, and one night his house was subjected to deliberate arson. Fortunately, Madison himself miraculously managed to escape, but many valuable documents and records were irretrievably destroyed in fire. Another well-known figure was Ellis Harper, independent journalist from Chicago, who conducted his own investigation, methodically gathered testimonies, and publicly spoke about necessity to renew full-scale official investigation of presidential death. He was repeatedly beaten on streets, regularly threatened with reprisal, until one dark day he disappeared without trace after leaving editorial office. His body was discovered several weeks later, drowned in river, but many colleagues and friends consider circumstances of his death extremely suspicious. In atmosphere of constant threat and growing pressure, investigative journalists created unofficial associations and secret mutual aid societies, allowing them to exchange dangerous information and support each other morally. Despite these precautionary measures, repressions against them did not cease. Numerous letters and telephone calls with reprisal threats, persistent attempts at bribery and blackmail, as well as chain of mysterious accidents relentlessly pursued all who dared seek truth. Numerous cases of attempted bribery and intimidation were recorded even of very young journalists who only tried publishing materials questioning official version of events. Some of them, after such incidents, preferred completely withdrawing from covering such dangerous topics, panicking for their safety and their families' safety. Also, there were reliable rumors that against investigators and journalists, sophisticated psychological pressure methods were systematically applied. Constant persecution, telephone wiretapping, and crude interference in their personal lives. Some of these courageous investigators managed to obtain dangerous information in their autobiographies and secret diaries, which subsequently became invaluable source for subsequent generations of truth researchers. However, many of these unique materials also were subjected to cruel censorship and organized persecution, and some were simply destroyed by unknowns. History of murdered journalists and systematic persecution of independent investigators became an integral part of dark mystery surrounding Theodore Roosevelt's death. It clearly shows how deadly dangerous it is to oppose powerful forces that completely control information and political power in country. These brave people paid with their own lives for attempts to reveal terrible truth, but their selfless courage continues inspiring truth seekers to this day, forcing serious thought about real price of freedom of speech and democratic values. These terror measures greatly undermined moral condition and physical health of independent researchers and created suffocating atmosphere of universal paranoia and chilling fear. Nevertheless, despite all these monstrous trials and deadly dangers, materials found by them, information leaks, and records of truth-obsessed journalists became solid foundation for numerous alternative versions of events actively supported by independent research community. Today, despite continuing risk, new generation of fearless journalists and independent researchers continues unequal struggle to reveal past secrets, relying on modern technological capabilities and global information space. Their sacred task is shedding bright light on darkest history pages, so that memory of heroes like Theodore Roosevelt and their uncompromising struggle for truth and justice never be forgotten. Their work helps not only preserve historical memory, but also inspires future generations to continue sacred struggle for truth, however dangerous it may be. Theodore Roosevelt's death is not an isolated case in USA history. Comparing circumstances of his demise with murders of other presidents, such as Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy, reveals alarming parallels indicating existence of unified scheme for eliminating politically inconvenient leaders. This scheme includes carefully planned conspiracies, use of secret services, public opinion manipulations, and truth concealment from people. Abraham Lincoln was killed in 1865 after difficult civil war when country was ruined and fragmented. His death became result of carefully prepared conspiracy involving both Confederacy supporters and influential Northern forces, fearing radical reforms and destruction of old orders. Murder occurred at Ford's Theater, making it maximally shocking and symbolic for entire nation, and subsequent investigation attempts got tangled in bureaucratic delays and political intrigues. John F. Kennedy was killed in 1963 when his progressive policy and personal charm became deadly dangerous for numerous powerful groups, including CIA, organized crime, and financial industrial elite. His assassination in Dallas still causes numerous alternative versions and suspicions, and official investigation known as Warren Commission left many unanswered questions and generated even more mysteries among public. Roosevelt's death demonstrates amazing similarity with these tragic cases. All three leaders had courage to openly voice inconvenient truths, question existing order, and seriously threaten interests of powerful shadow circles. All of them were subjected to constant pressure, direct threats, and systematic attempts to destroy their political reputation long before a deadly plan of their elimination was finally implemented. Additionally, all three presidents had reputation of uncompromising reformers, whom powerful elites of their time feared and hated. Lincoln tirelessly fought for preserving country unity and complete cessation of slavery, which destroyed established social and economic foundations of American South. Kennedy actively tried reforming corrupted system, significantly reducing organized crime and CIA influence, and also successfully approached common people through modern media, extremely irritating conservative old guard. Their deaths were accompanied by immediate attempts to quickly close all investigations and carefully sweep away all evidence, which is direct indication of secret services and informal highest-level groups' active participation. Common characteristic feature was that none of them died natural death. All became victims of carefully staged conspiracies where state structures, secret organizations, and external forces closely interacted to realize their criminal goals. Another alarming common feature is systematic manipulations with official information and medical documents. In cases with Lincoln and Kennedy, extremely controversial expertises were conducted, and key documents were either rewritten or completely destroyed to support beneficial official version at any cost. Absolutely analogous actions were observed in Roosevelt's case, which is irrefutable testimony of coordination efforts to conceal truth at highest state power levels. Elimination technique included not only direct physical elimination of leader, murder, or poisoning, but also subsequent total information manipulation, mass disinformation, and complete substitution of true facts with false ones. Society undergoes constant and merciless information attack, where real facts and testimonies are systematically replaced with carefully constructed narratives maximally convenient for ruling elites. Conspirators masterfully use advanced propaganda technologies, harsh censorship, and sophisticated psychological pressure for complete public opinion control and effective prevention of any truth revelation. All three presidents were characterized by sudden and cruel death that became real shock for an entire nation and left deep, unhealing scars in collective people's memory. These national tragedies also led to significant strengthening of control over state institutions and dramatic growth of Secret Service's role in country's political life, substantially contributing to strengthening positions of secret forces behind these bloody events. Intrigues around each death inevitably led to social unrest, political crises, and rise of repressive control in country. Comparative analysis of these cases clearly indicates existence of proven systematic scheme purposefully directed at physical elimination of leaders representing deadly threat to hidden power structures. This devilish scheme provides for comprehensive use of political, economic, and force resources for systematic undermining of presidential security, conducting large-scale manipulations with legal and medical processes, as well as for cruel suppression of any opposition. Exposing this criminal scheme becomes main key to understanding genuine American history and those secret mechanisms that invariably allow preserving absolute power in hands of narrow chosen circles. This also raises fundamental questions about democracy, fate, genuine freedom, and people's sacred right to truth that is repeatedly trampled for sake of selfish interests of insignificant minority. Stories of Lincoln, Kennedy, and Roosevelt murders are carefully documented and deeply studied by contemporary researchers as classical examples of large-scale political conspiracies clearly demonstrating darkest and most disgusting sides of American history. They serve as menacing reminder that hidden forces possess terrifying ability to fundamentally influence world history course through physical elimination of key political figures, radically changing entire countries' development directions and determining fates of millions of innocent people. This became a harsh lesson for all future generations about how deadly dangerous it is to openly expose true face of power and throw direct challenge to unshakable established orders, especially those inseparably connected with international finance and influential secret societies. Thus, deaths of Roosevelt, Lincoln, and Kennedy are not just separate tragic episodes of American history, but integral parts of one dark and bloody mosaic of political murders united by common merciless logic and proven methods of eliminating undesirable people's leaders skillfully masked as accidents or natural illnesses. Contemporary evidence confirming conspiracy theory around Theodore Roosevelt's death gradually emerges from shadows thanks to government archive declassification and tireless efforts of independent researchers. In recent decades, entire series of historical documents previously considered hopelessly inaccessible or forever lost have been made public, opening new mysterious facts and convincingly confirming validity of fears about carefully planned conspiracy against president existence. One of most important sources became declassified CIA and FBI materials containing secret reports and official correspondences directly indicating active intelligence service interference in matters connected with Roosevelt Circle. These compromising documents record in detail operations for total control, round-the-clock surveillance, and even systematic discrediting of persons close to President, as well as systematic attempts at rigid information flow management to unconditionally maintain beneficial official version of his death. Also first published were internal protocols of closed National Security Council meetings where serious risks connected with Roosevelt's uncontrolled behavior and his dangerous investigative activity were openly discussed. In these top-secret documents, clearly visible are direct motives for President's physical elimination, including panic fears before inevitable revelation of compromising truth about influential financial and political elites, as well as about powerful secret societies secretly managing American government. Special interest aroused recently published medical reports and expert conclusions subjected to thorough review in light of modern high-tech analysis methods. Several independent expertises definitively confirmed presence of obvious poisoning signs with exotic toxins in deceased president's organism, as well as revealed numerous unexplainable inconsistencies in original diagnoses and medical conclusions. Despite these sensational discoveries, official version of natural death still remains untouchable for majority of historians. New declassified documents reveal in detail secrets of secret meetings between high-ranking officials, influential financiers, and intelligence representatives who coordinated joint actions to eliminate deadly threat in person of rebellious Roosevelt. Among these explosive materials revealed are records of confidential conversations about possible application of advanced biological and chemical weapons, significantly strengthening scientific suppositions about sophisticated poisoning use as main political murder instrument. Additionally, significant part of declassified materials contains irrefutable evidence of large-scale medical documentation manipulations and systematic, deliberate disinformation, purposefully directed at creating absolutely false version of President's natural illness and death. This exhaustively explains numerous glaring inconsistencies in official reports and existence of several mutually exclusive event versions that rapidly replaced each other in first critical days and months after national tragedy. Declassified social services and police department files also irrefutably testify that many key witnesses and Roosevelt's close associates immediately became objects of constant surveillance and systematic psychological pressure. Names of some of them to this day remain in strictly classified archives, and precisely this circumstance fundamentally prevents final investigation and awakens all new-founded suspicions of truth concealment. Additional sensational findings include audio recordings of closed government meetings and secret negotiations of highest officials that were transcribed and analyzed in recent years. In them clearly heard are frank discussions of effective methods for preventing dangerous information leaks and acute necessity of radical elimination of political threats. Participants of these compromising conversations quite clearly spoke of Roosevelt as unsolvable problem requiring immediate radical impact measures. Contemporary advanced technologies, including complex digital analysis of historical documents and high-tech restoration of damaged archival materials, allow researchers to penetrate ever deeper into very essence of previously completely unknown, ominous details. Specialists already discovered glaring inconsistencies in numerous official papers, which is irrefutable testimony of large-scale falsifications and professional forgeries performed with single goal of fundamental distortion of genuine historical events. Moreover, international research groups and independent experts revealed that some particularly important key documents were secretly moved and reliably hidden in foreign state archives, clearly indicating active participation of foreign intelligence services in global conspiracy against American president. This definitively confirms international character of large-scale operation to eliminate Roosevelt that went far beyond USA borders and affected vital interests of influential world elites. Some contemporary researchers also received exclusive access to sensational testimonies from currently living descendants of those people who were directly involved in bloody events of that time. In strictly confidential conversations and personal notes, they openly admitted real existence of deadly conspiracies and sincerely expressed deep regret about committed atrocity, convincingly confirming monstrous scale and merciless cruelty of that criminal operation. Also made public were personal correspondences and secret diaries of some high-ranking political figures of that time, who frankly reveal true motives, detailed plans, and panic fears connected with coordinated actions against undesirable Roosevelt. These unique testimonies definitively prove that tragic incident was by no means accidental tragedy or natural death, but represented carefully planned and professionally executed act of physical elimination of dangerous political leader. 21st century technologies allow effectively restoring irretrievably lost archives and conducting deep scientific analysis of unique materials previously absolutely inaccessible to researchers. This gives founded hope that in foreseeable future it will be possible to reveal even more sensational details and definitively settle this mysterious case that has dramatically dragged on for more than the entire century. However, despite impressive wide circle of new compromising data, some fundamentally important key questions still remain without exhaustive answer, since investigation-related documents and witnesses still remain inaccessible to public or stubbornly keep silence. This circumstance only additionally fuels public interest in forbidden topic and stimulates further persistent investigations by independent activists, professional historians, and investigative journalists. Contemporary facts and declassified materials allow researchers to speak with complete confidence that conspiracy theory around Theodore Roosevelt's mysterious death has exceptionally solid evidentiary base, and that shocking truth was indeed carefully and systematically hidden from unsuspecting society for many decades. These sensational testimonies become bright light in dark labyrinth of falsified history, helping independent researchers and general public understand genuine scales of hidden political intrigues that continue having decisive influence on world political life even in our days. Declassified documents and sensational new facts in Theodore Roosevelt case are direct challenge to lying official history and open invitation to fundamental rethinking of truly significant 20th century events. They serve as menacing reminder that behind respectable public picture always hide numerous dark, ominous layers requiring exceptional courage and iron persistence for complete understanding and final revelation before humanity. Numerous secrets surrounding Theodore Roosevelt's death remain unsolved today, but one of most intriguing and painful is meaningful silence of President's own family. Great Roosevelt's descendants, possessing exclusive access to private family archives and oral traditions passed from generation to generation, are suspiciously closed and categorically unwilling to share true reason for their great ancestors' tragic demise with general public. Roosevelt family dynasty for many centuries took pride in their outstanding political legacy and exceptional role in American history. But precisely Theodore's mysterious death remains that fatal secret painfully dividing entire family into two irreconcilable camps. Overwhelming majority of descendants have strict unwritten agreement to unswervingly maintain tomb-like silence about what actually happened that fateful night when outstanding nation leaders' life tragically ended. Family members often flatly refuse commenting any independent investigations and carefully avoid journalists' direct questions about true circumstances of their famous ancestors' death. Reliable sources close to family categorically assert that in narrow family circles, sensational documents and compromising testimonies are regularly discussed that fundamentally diverge from imposed official version of events. These explosive internal knowledge is carefully passed by inheritance from older generation to younger, but remains carefully hidden from intrusive public attention so as not to cause irreparable harm to families' unblemished reputation and not provoke destructive political scandals of national scale. There exists founded opinion that Roosevelt family possesses unique personal letters and secret diaries detailing real events, legal particulars, and specific names of people involved in deadly conspiracy. Some authoritative relatives were repeatedly offered making these priceless historical documents accessible to independent researchers and general public, but they always categorically refused such proposals, sincerely fearing for personal safety and striving at any cost to preserve unblemished family dignity. Well known that some influential family members repeatedly faced serious pressure and unambiguous warnings from outside directly indicating vital necessity to strictly keep family secrets. It is believed threats came not only from powerful political circles, but included transparent hints at possible tragic consequences regarding innocent heirs. This sophisticated psychological pressure for decades generated suffocating atmosphere of all-penetrating fear, effectively promoting unwavering preservation of tomb-like silence. Several times in influential press appeared sharp questions about why family so submissively and unfailingly supports dubious official version even despite regular appearance of new compromising information. However, any persistent attempt to shed bright light on concealed truth was immediately hindered by formal statements about noble desire to respect great ancestors' bright memory and carefully preserve sacred family peace. Some cautious family members sincerely believe that public revelation of shocking truth may cause completely irreparable damage not only to their impeccable public reputation, but also physical safety of descendants and close people. Theodore Roosevelt's glorious legacy for them is not only subject of lawful national pride, but also heavy burden inseparably connected with agonizing necessity to carefully hide terrible family secrets from world. In closed family conversations constantly sound alarming talks about so-called Roosevelt curse, mystical fear that any attempts at revealing true story inevitably may lead to catastrophic and unpredictably dangerous consequences. Despite general family caution, part of young generation family in recent years began showing quite natural interest in previously tightly closed archives and personal documents that for long decades were kept in strictest secrecy. They show sincere desire to understand what exactly happened in reality and what genuine reasons led to their outstanding ancestors' tragic death. These timid attempts, despite absence of broad public disclosure, caused noticeable nervousness and growing concern among conservative senior family members and their closest trusted circle who still decisively oppose any such research undertakings. Within family circle, increasingly flare-heated discussions between those persistently insisting on complete frankness and ardently wishing forever remove veils from past darkness, and those convincedly believing it much better to preserve traditional silence for sake of safety and unblemished honor of ancient lineage. This agonizing internal struggle inevitably generates complex psychological and emotional tensions, making family dynamics particularly painful and dramatic. Despite official reluctance to openly speak about national tragedy, increasingly in behind-scenes, family discussions emerge ominous stories about deep distrust of official versions and secret prohibition instructions inexorably coming from highest state power echelons. Many cautious relatives constantly remind each other of vital necessity to be extremely careful and under no circumstances share dangerous information even with closest and most trusted friends, inevitably creating suffocating atmosphere of forced isolation and mystical tension in family relations. This internal family legend for many generations effectively maintains proven silence mechanism and decisively promotes shocking truth, forever remaining under reliable cover of family secrets and all-penetrating fears. However, despite traditional official silence of older generation, some representatives of young family generation in recent years begin cautiously showing growing interest in previously strictly forbidden documents and try independently studying complex family history without regard for time-honored prohibitions. Perhaps precisely they, in foreseeable future, will become those brave people who one day decide to tell a mazed world complete truth about tragedy their family so long and carefully concealed from humanity. Thus, influential Roosevelt family is kind of hereditary keeper of terrible secret lying at very foundation of tragedy, of one of greatest and most beloved American presidents by people. Their many-year stubborn silence is by no means simply blind tribute to ancient family traditions, but quite conscious protection from unbearable mental pain, destructive political pressure, and quite real deadly threats. Dramatic history of Roosevelt family inseparably intertwines with genuine history of entire country, and its carefully guarded secrets continue having decisive influence on contemporary searches for historical truth and justice. True puppeteers of American politics standing behind Theodore Roosevelt's elimination are powerful club of financial magnates, influential industrial families, and secret organization leaders striving to preserve their exclusive privileges and total control over country's fate. Their power extends far beyond official state institution frameworks, and they masterfully manipulate political processes, laws, and public opinion for merciless protection of their selfish interests. Foundation of this omnipotent elite lies ancient families whose colossal wealth and unprecedented might formed over centuries, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Morgans, and Warburgs, as well as less known to general public but no less influential financial dynasties. These banking clans have branched enterprise and bank networks worldwide and regard America as their key base for maintaining global economic dominance. One key figure in this shadow elite was John Pierpont Morgan, whose financial mighty clan not only controlled country's largest banks and industrial enterprises, but also had owned influence agencies in government and security structures. His influence extended not only across USA territory, but far beyond its borders, making him one of most dangerous and implacable opponents of Theodore Roosevelt's independent and reformist course. Billionaire Rothschilds were widely known for their international network of banks and secret societies, which many researchers directly connect with total control over world economy. Their ominous role in Roosevelt's elimination was directly connected with desperate attempts to preserve iron control over American dollar and avoid threatening reforms at any cost that menaced forever undermining their financial might. Precisely these mighty families and their trusted persons stood behind creating and establishing total control over Federal Reserve System, allowing private banks unhindered management of country's money supply and decisive impact on entire American economy. Theodore Roosevelt, with his progressive reforms and resolute attempts to limit these dark forces' pernicious influence, created direct and deadly threat to their financial monopoly and unlimited power over nation. Besides omnipotent financial magnates, among true puppeteers hide influential Masonic lodge leaders possessing unquestionable influence in various political and state institutions across entire country. These ancient secret societies provide necessary infrastructure for effective coordination of ruling elite efforts and systematic infiltration of their devoted agents into all key state posts. Active participation in conspiracy against Roosevelt was taken by Masonic organization tops who, possessing secret esoteric knowledge and extensive international contacts, acted as skillful puppeteers, expertly directing fates of entire states and individual political figures. Their influence was so colossal, it effortlessly penetrated even executive power highest echelons, ensuring flawless coordination and successful realization of deadly plan to eliminate undesirable president. Most notable and influential were Eastern Masonic lodges, which for centuries played central role in making most important political and financial decisions, both visible to public and hidden from outside eyes. Their mystical rituals, secret symbols, and ancient traditions created strong bloody connections and left indelible imprint on USA political landscape of early 20th century. History of some of these ominous organizations' founding goes back to deep past and closely connects with modern banking systems' birth and industrial revolution. Their pernicious influence organically transferred from feudal era of kings and emperors into modern world of state governance, carefully preserving their age-old secrets and proven methods of total mass control. Political leaders who came to power after Roosevelt's successful elimination were by no means independent political actors. They were tightly bound to these omnipotent elites through corruption system, blackmail, or direct force pressure. Their appointment to key posts and further political support came precisely from these inaccessible closed circles, turning entire official political process into cynical farce and dangerous illusion of people's power. Under iron control of true puppeteers is practically entire legislative power, judicial system, mass media, and even significant part of state security structures. They solely manage election campaign financing, media coverage of most important events, and merciless suppression of critical voices, creating carefully thought-out reality picture maximally convenient for maintaining own undivided dominance over country. International connections of these elites go far beyond United States of America borders. Through branched network of banks, transnational corporations, and diplomatic channels, they effectively coordinate their actions with European, Asian, and Middle Eastern partners in criminal business, giving them unprecedented opportunity to directly influence global politics and world economy, tirelessly promoting their selfish interests on international arena. Main shadow governance methods include skillful manipulation of public fear, large-scale corruption of state officials, cynical staging of political crises, and destructive wars, as well as complex financial machinations, allowing systematic redistribution of national wealth in their favor and maintaining economic dependence of governments on world financial centers. Thus, Theodore Roosevelt's elimination became logical result of colossal integration of dark forces, including financial industrial magnates, influential secret societies, and corrupt political elites. This criminal coalition, possessing complete control over key state institutions, managed to physically destroy deadly threat to their power and preserve undivided dominance over American society for many decades ahead. Revealing genuine identity of these true puppeteers becomes vitally necessary step for weakening their pernicious influence and returning genuine democratic foundations of state governance. However, these mighty forces possess truly enormous material resources and age-old experience, allowing them to effectively embed into any political power and successfully oppose any attempts at fundamental changes of existing order. Nevertheless, historical truth cannot be hidden forever. Contemporary independent researchers, professional historians, and investigative journalists tirelessly continue dangerous work exposing criminal activity of these closed circles, painstakingly analyze declassified government documents, carefully monitor their current actions, and help broad society understand hidden mechanisms of real power in country. Discovery and public recognition of this shadow power existence is completely integral step on difficult path toward restoring social justice and true democracy in USA, as well as to substantial weakening of pernicious influence of criminal structures still freely ruling behind political scenes. Understanding who really governs America definitively reveals true reason for physical elimination of such outstanding people's leaders as Theodore Roosevelt, who dared openly challenge these mighty and absolutely merciless structures. True puppeteers hypocritically hiding behind respectable official facades remain main challenge for contemporary freedom-loving society and serve as clear guide for all those sincerely striving to create bright future forever free from suffocating hidden tyranny of financial political elites. Their age-old struggle for truth and social justice remains inexhaustible source of inspiration for new generations of Americans striving to create honest and open society. Theodore Roosevelt's death story is not only great man's tragedy, but also ominous symbol of deepest secrets surrounding power, corruption, and merciless struggle for control in very heart of USA political machine. Regardless how official version of events was formed and how many decades passed since those fateful days, genuine truth about them remains covered with impenetrable veil of organized silence, systemic lies, and sophisticated public consciousness manipulations. Why is this terrible secret so densely shrouded in darkness, and why are all attempts to reveal it invariably suppressed at most diverse state power levels? Answer lies in very nature of those omnipotent forces governing not only America, but entire modern world. These dark forces possess colossal material resources, unlimited political influence, and ability to affect fates of entire peoples, ceaselessly fighting to preserve their privileged position and categorically not allowing light of historical truth to penetrate particularly dangerous spheres for them. Theodore Roosevelt's death is far from isolated tragic case, but merely one link in long chain of dark deeds involving mighty international elites, totally controlling financial, political, and military power mechanisms worldwide. Their treacherous methods were tested and perfected over centuries. Systematic physical elimination of inconvenient leaders and outstanding reformers combined with unprecedented scale work to conceal compromising evidence and total public consciousness manipulation. Very fact that overwhelming majority of people still do not know true state of affairs directly relates to most careful information control and merciless suppression of any dissent at all society levels. Despite impressive technological progress and seeming development of free information access, lion's share of key historical data remains still strictly classified and accessible only to narrow circle of chosen ones. Today, we can only build guesses about what monstrous secrets hide behind impregnable walls of government institutions, in underground intelligence archives, and private banking corporations through which fates of millions of innocent people undividedly pass. Theodore Roosevelt's tragic death story serves us as harsh reminder of how fragile and conditional is boundary between historical truth and official fiction, between light of truth and impenetrable shadows of state lies. Nevertheless, precisely today, in era of unprecedented information exchange and global communications, each of us has unique opportunity and sacred duty to seek own answers to inconvenient questions, critically analyze available historical data, and never accept anything on blind faith. Calling every reader to maximum attentiveness, developed critical thinking, and continuous independent research, we open door to real possibility of revealing at least part of that terrible truth originally hidden from humanity. Historical truth very often hides precisely in small details, in forgotten archival documents, lost witness testimonies, and personal memories of those few who preferred silence from quite founded fear for their life and close one's safety. Every person sincerely wishing to go difficult path of truth-seeking must with reasonable caution, but iron persistent seek these precious keys to truth, patiently untangle most complex web of age-old deception, tirelessly awaken public consciousness, and inspire others to sacred struggle with suffocating shadows of organized oblivion. Let bright memory of Theodore Roosevelt and his unbroken struggle for justice become for new generations of Americans bright symbol of true courage, incorruptible honesty, and social justice. And mysterious secret of his tragic death, let remain eternal challenge to human conscience, menacing reminder that sincere striving for historical truth and social light will always meet fierce resistance from dark forces. But precisely this noble striving leads to real spiritual awakening and final liberation from tyranny. Let each of us become worthy heir of those few heroes who are not afraid to ask inconvenient questions to powers that be, boldly throw open challenge to corrupted might, and selflessly reveal truth. That sacred truth they so long and persistently tried to hide from us, but which we, as free people, unconditionally deserve to know and must pass to future generations. Truth patiently awaits its new heroes. Do not wait for someone else to find answers for you. Do not rely on official versions. Do not believe those who say some secrets are better left untouched. Search doubt. Investigate. Ask questions. Truth about Theodore Roosevelt's death is merely tip of iceberg. Beneath it hides entire world of secrets that shape our world to this day. Every document you find, every inconsistency in official version, every testimony is step toward liberation from age-old deception. Remember, they can hide truth from us, but cannot force us to stop seeking it. Truth will make us free, but only if we are brave enough to find it. And now, for the most important part, ladies and gentlemen, you'll see our latest video on your screen, along with the subscribe button that you should definitely click, and a whole playlist of similar stories. Since you've watched all the way to the end, make sure to subscribe and check out either the playlist on the right or the fresh video on the left. Whatever interests you more, thanks.